last week we talked about the overall application and the narrative. This week we're talking about the logic model. And we'll be walking through some specifics about the logic model, and I'll also be sharing with you all a sample. And because, Anne, you were the first one to join last week, I decided to use CIS as an example. And so y'all be seeing a sample logic model using kind of communities and schools as the example. I see someone else trying to come in, so I'm admitting them now. All right. So just real quickly, I'd like to do introductions of the folks that are in the room beyond the ones that we just did. So it looks like we still have some people struggling to come in. Anne, would you mind introducing yourself real quick and just your name, organization, experience with AmeriCorps and writing the grant again? I know you did it last week, but.
Hi, I'm Ann Wilbur, and I'm with Communities in Schools of Hampton Roads, and we're a student success and dropout prevention nonprofit. It's actually a national organization, so there are affiliates all over the country, which is why Amy is familiar because we're huge in Texas.
Yeah.
And this is our first foray into AmeriCorps, but several of our other affiliates have AmeriCorps programs. And so what I was doing at the staff meeting was saying, hey, we've got affiliates that are using them this way and this way. Like, how do you see us using them? And then I had to leave. So
yeah. You can give us some insight with the logic model. Yes. Yeah.
And I used to run the Communities in Schools AmeriCorps program for the Central Texas affiliate.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I was there for over 5.5 years.
Okay.
All right, Stephanie, would you mind introducing yourself?
There, yeah. Hi, I'm Stephanie Martin. I'm with Augusta Health Foundation in Fishersville, Virginia. And I have written this grant once before, but I'm excited to kind of see how things have changed and what we need to incorporate into this one.
Great. Fantastic. And it looks like Elizabeth is still trying to join. I know Annalise and Mary have joined us from the commission. I know Annalise has already said
Elizabeth is from the commission and Mary is from People Inc. I don't know if she's able to introduce herself.
That's right. I got it backwards. Mary, you want to introduce yourself?
Sorry, I was in the middle of doing some other things. Sorry, I joined you all late.
No, that's okay.
I'm Mary Beth Tigner. I'm the training and volunteer coordinator for People Incorporated of Virginia, located in Southwest Virginia. And have been also an AmeriCorps alum myself. Great. And have been talking to Annalise and exploring options for some community coordinated AmeriCorps group activities with some of our community partners and such moving forward. So
great. Mary, remind me, have you had experience with the AmeriCorps grant at all?
I have not written one before.
Okay.
I have seen the process when I was at my AmeriCorps site. I still stay in touch with them. And so I've been part of helping them with some of their AmeriCorps grant stuff since then.
Oh, that's great.
So I've seen pieces and parts of it,
okay.
But I've not done one myself. So that's what I'm learning.
Great. All right. Well, perfect. Thanks for
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, we'll just go ahead and get started and with this learning of this piece here with the logic model. I want to just a reminder, if you all have questions at any point in time, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute your mic and ask. I want to make sure that we get your questions answered throughout. So I want to just do a few reminders from last week because they're very connected to the logic model. And so I want to talk a little bit about, understanding AmeriCorps because it's going to be integrated into your logic model document. So as a reminder, all AmeriCorps programs, no matter what they do, and we talked about the focus areas last week, they all focus on the 4 guiding principles or legs of the stool, as we talked about it last week. And in particular, in the logic model, you have the opportunity to convey 2 of the legs of the stool for sure that get things done in the member experience. So I want to review a couple of pieces on that right now. I mean, one, in the get things done, your task will be to visually show in the logic model document that we'll talk about in a moment, these pieces you see here, and I'm going to talk about a few right now. So first, you're going to be expected to talk about the community problem. So in one of the columns of the document called the problem column, you will have the task of showing the reviewers and the commission in particular the problems that your community or communities are facing. And you will have to share data that can also demonstrate that problem to convey how compelling it is, how severe it is, and those will ultimately be connected to the activities you're proposing. Now, the problem can be both about the end beneficiaries that your members will potentially be serving, and they can also be something that you're trying to address with the members themselves. And I'll get to that when I show you the sample to give you an example, because that might not sound super clear right now. The second thing you're going to have to outline in the logic model that's part of this leg of the stool or the guiding principles is just really well thought out activities that address those problems. So as a reminder, you're going to have to think about what specifically will the members be doing on a day-to-day basis, and you'll need to convey this in your logic model. You have to think through all the activities that they will be doing to complete their terms of service. And you're going to have to think about like how many hours will that be and how will that be shaped over time throughout their service term. And then ultimately it's expected that you have a strong program design, whether your members are doing like the exact same thing, no matter where they're placed, or they're doing a few different things. It's expected that you have a strong design, and that starts with your logic model document. Over time, you're expected to demonstrate impact and evidence of success, but that starts first with your logic model and looking at it and saying, if we do this and we put these resources into the program, we should see these outputs and outcomes happen. And those are the things that you're going to look to see, okay, what can we collect information on to show our success? And as a reminder, I think for you all that are thinking about new potential programs at your organizations, it's really important to think through the questions that I'll briefly go through again that we shared last week, because that will also again inform your logic model. What are you currently doing that you're not reaching the scale, scope, and reach of what you want to do? Maybe you're doing something in your organization, but you're only able to like serve a certain amount of individuals and you want to do more, or you're only able to do this level and you want to dig deeper. What are the problems or gaps that you're not meeting? The question I always love to ask people is, if you could wave your magic wand, what will you do with these AmeriCorps members? What would you like to solve as a problem that you're seeing in the communities and people that you serve? And then that should lead to activities you want your members to do. One of the things you're going to have to make sure that as you think of those activities, you have to determine if they're things that are allowable or not. There's some terms that you'll have to get to know in terms of unallowable, allowable, or prohibited. I'll share with you at the end a resource that you can have access to that will help you understand those terms. But there's certain things that AmeriCorps members paid through federal dollars cannot do as a part of their service. So you'll have to get to know that a little bit. And then you're going to have to think about like, where would they serve? Are all our members doing the same thing, or are they doing some different things? Maybe all your members are doing the exact same thing, or half of your members are doing one thing and half of your members are doing another. Or you have 3 buckets and 1/3 is doing this and 1/3 is doing this and 1/3 is doing this. You have the opportunity to think through whatever design will help you move the needle along the problems you're trying to address. And then you have to think about, based upon that, like, how many members are we thinking about? What does that mean in terms of hours that they would have the opportunity to serve? Like, when would we need them? Will we need them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? Or will we need them 5 days a week? Or do we only need them in the summertime? Based upon that, you then determine how many hours they would serve, that they would be able to get in to do what you're asking them to do. And that would also include training you provide them. And then that would determine what type of member you're wanting to have. And I showed you all those service terms last time. They'll come up again when we talk about the budget. But you'll have to think about it. Do I need a 300-hour member or a 1,700-hour member or a 900-hour member? And then, how long will they serve? You need to set your members up for success in getting their hours in and the time frame which you're having them serve. And then all this then leads to kind of, who do I need to engage in some further discussion? Because it's not just you that needs to be a part of this process. There are partners you need to engage with. So like Anne was talking about, she was meeting with her leadership team and they were having dialogue about it. Maybe you meet with other staff at the hospital or outside partners that might be places where members are serving. Whoever is going to have to be a part of making this program a success, you're going to have to start talking with them now about the plan. So you have buy-in from the beginning. And then you'll have to think about, what are the things that I need to put into the program that will help make it successful? Because this will be useful in your logic model and also in your budget, which we'll talk about in December. Making sure you're okay. Yeah. And then the second piece that I just wanted to remind you all of is the importance of the member experience. It's really what makes AmeriCorps unique, and that a part of AmeriCorps is about developing the AmeriCorps members. So not only can they carry out the activities you're asking them to carry out, but that you also develop them personally and professionally so they leave their service term having some transferable skills and experiences that will help them in their next steps, whether it's personal or professional, and hopefully also that they increase their level of engagement in community and civic life as a result of the time. All of this also can be very represented in your logic model. So with that said, we're going to talk about the logic model. I'm going to go through all the columns of the logic model because it's a table. And then once I go through the table columns, I'm going to share with you all a sample, and I'll go through, kind of walk you through some examples of things that you would put in those columns with the sample. And then we'll send that to you all afterwards as a support for you. It's not the end all be all sample, but it's a good starter for you all to look at so you can think about what yours might resemble. So first of all, the logic model is one component of many that are part of the grant application. Last week, we talked about the narrative. That's another big part. In December, we're going to be talking about performance measures and budget. Those are the two other big parts. And then there's some other things that you have to do as a part of the grant application. But those four things are kind of the big pieces. The logic model is 8 pages as it prints out in eGrants. It does not equate exactly to a word page count, but fairly close. So if you create your logic model in your Word document, like we're going to tell you, you should definitely do before you put into eGrants. It's a close resemblance, but don't assume that 8 pages in Word is going to be 8 pages in eGrants, because the headings take up some significant space in eGrants. So you'll have to do some testing. Okay, so the logic model document is read in concert with the narrative that we talked about last week. So the first big section of the narrative and we introduced this last week, and if you weren't a part, you can listen to the recording, is program design. It's really the big meat of the narrative. And the first section in program design is called community and logic model, okay? The other pieces, there's 4 subsections in there, but the first section is called community and logic model. What happens is that your application to award points for that first section, I'm going to go back, that community and logic model section will have a point allocation, okay? So will evidence-based, so will notice priority, so will member experience. They'll score you on each of those subsections. But for community and logic model, it's not just the narrative you write in that section, it's also the logic model document. So they'll look at the narrative of that section and your logic model document to award the full points. Okay, so both of those are read kind of together to award you whatever that point allocation is for that subsection. And if you need to go back to the recording to look at what that narrative part of the section has, it's mostly stuff about the problem, whereas your logic model document really conveys the picture of your program, what you'd like it to look like. Again, it's 8 pages as it prints out from eGrants. It's a 7-column document that I'm about to show you. And the big thing about the logic model, because some of you maybe have had experiences with logic models before, and you're probably thinking, 8 pages, that's a lot. It is. It used to be 3 pages, but now it's 8 pages because this document is really what you're using to communicate everything about your program design. They're not really asking about that anymore in the narrative like they used to. So your logic model document conveys that. So this is what it looks like, kind of a big screenshot of it. There are 7 columns. The first 3 are kind of framing your program and what you're putting into it. The last 4 are the things that you're hoping to see as a result of what you're doing. So we're going to go through each of these and talk through them. And then again, I'm going to show you a sample and provide you with a sample afterwards. So the first column is your problem section. It's just the things I was talking about earlier. You know, what's showing up as an issue that makes you think something needs to be done? What's happening that is meriting your attention? You know, what data do you have to share? How can you talk about it in this unfortunate column document? But you start first with like setting the stage for the problem and give some data to demonstrate it. Okay. I'm going to skip the inputs column and save that for last, so I didn't forget a slide. So we started with the problem column. Now I'm going to the third column, which is activities. And that's where you're going to lay out what specifically will members do to address the problem. You know, as you think about their day, their week, their months, what are they doing? And you're going to need to be as specific as possible because the readers are going to want to see, okay, based upon what they're saying, we think, yes, they're going to be able to move the needle on some things they're talking about. And it makes sense for the type of members they're asking for. You know, if you're asking for full-time members and the only thing you have listed in your activity is to do an after-school program, that's going to raise some eyebrows because after-school program is probably only 2 to 4 hours, and that's not a full-time member responsibility. They'd have to be doing something else in addition to that. So for your activities, where possible, especially on the primary activities, the things they're doing on their bulk of their time, it's important that you list things like dosage or intensity, frequency, length, and target population. So dosage or intensity is like, well, all this is like the number of times they do it, for how much time, how often, for how long. It's giving those kinds of details. Like, do they do something 2 times a week for 30 minutes at a time for 12 weeks? Like that kind of a detail where you can is important. And then also specify the target population. Like, is it young people, ages 10 to 14 who have been identified as at risk in one of 4 categories? You know, that kind of information. You can't always do all of this level with everything that you lay out in your activities column, but where you can, and particularly on your primary activities, you should strive to do this. Then there's the output column. That is representing counts only. Number of people served, number of things delivered or developed, number of projects completed, number of events coordinated. It's just counts. Okay, it's nothing about the change. And this is like everything you hope to see happen as a result of all those activities you listed. I think it's a really great idea to go through activity by activity and see, okay, is there an output I can talk about? And you don't have to like give specific numbers to everything or to most things, but it's really important that you try to like paint the picture of what your members should be producing as a result of their time. Additionally, you might have counts for your members themselves, especially if you have a particular like professional development piece you're trying to do with members. One of the things you might want to do is also represent counts and actually activities, the column before that related to the members. And in the sample I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you an example. We're going to talk about this in December, but another thing you're going to have to represent in this column is your performance measure. As a part of the AmeriCorps grant, you are required to report on a primary activity, and you are required to pick an output performance measure and an outcome performance measure. Again, we're going to talk about it in December, but I want to introduce it now because it's one of the things that has to be shown in your logic model. And in the sample I'll show you, I'll show you how visually that would look. And then there's the 3 columns on the far right that are about your outcomes, the change you're hoping to have happen, either in the end beneficiaries, which could be people, it could be organizations, it could be spaces, and it also could be in the members themselves too. There's 3 columns, short, medium, and long. It's not specifically related to time, but specifically related to types of changes. So short-term changes are changes in knowledge, skills, attitudes, opinions. Medium term are changes in behaviors or action as a result of that change in knowledge, skills, attitudes, and opinions. And long term is changes in condition or status in life. So as you write things in those columns, you want to double check that they match those definitions. You know, everything in the short-term column should only be about changes in knowledge, skills, attitudes, or opinions. Everything in the medium-term column should just be about changes in behavior, action, etc. Now, one of the number one questions we get all the time is, okay, if I put it here, do I have to report on it? And the answer is no. The only thing you really have to report on is your performance measures. And one of those columns will have your outcome measure in it because you have to have one output and one outcome. But everything else is just to paint a picture of what you're hoping to see happen as a result of your members' activities. And over time, you should be able to look at your logic model and determine other information you want to collect to show your impact, just for your own purposes and to grow evidence over time. But for right now, the only thing you have to report on if you become an AmeriCorps program is your performance measures and a few other like demographic data. Okay, so here's some examples of potential outcomes on of a specific program. Examples of short-term outcomes might be increased knowledge of coping skills, improved confidence in self. Those are, again, knowledge or attitudes, opinions. Medium term might be more frequent use of coping skills in times of stress or conflict, and increased participation in school activities. Okay, those are actions or behaviors. Long-term might be reduction in suicide rates, reduction in reported use of alcohol. These are just examples, but I'm demonstrating different types of outcomes you could put in there based upon the definitions of that column. I'll show you also the sample that will give you more. And then the final column that I didn't talk about in the beginning, which is your second column, is the input column. I say this for last because this to me is like the last thing you should not the last thing you should think about, but as you look at the whole picture of your logic model, what are all the things that you need to put into the program to make it successful? You know, the bucket visual here. It's like all the things you're going to put in the bucket to fill it up. So all the things you're going to put into your program bucket to make it successful. And that's your members, the number and type of members. It's the sites where you're going to be placing members at. If you're going to have sites, or if it's like internal, it's the schools maybe, or the departments that they're going to be in. It's program staff, it's funding, it could be training and curriculum, it could be additional supports you're providing the members, it could be research that you're using to think about the program. It's anything you're putting in to make it successful. At a minimum, to start, you have to talk about the two inputs you see on the screen. So the first thing that should be in the column is information about your members and information about your sites. The first thing that should be listed is your members, and you would put like the number and type of members you're asking. Maybe you're asking for 25 AmeriCorps members, 10 of them will be full-time, and 15 of them will be half-time. Okay, so you'll put that level of detail. And then next, you'll talk about the characteristics of the AmeriCorps members that you're hoping for them to have when they come to your program, or that you're hoping to train them in to do what you're asking them to do. So what knowledge, skills, abilities, background you're hoping them to have. Example, we work with a lot of college access programs. And some of the things they talk about is they're looking for near peer individuals that have graduated from college within 4 years, within the last 4 years, who represent the demographics of the communities they're going to serve. That's an example of some characteristics you share. Or maybe you're looking to have students that are in a particular department at the local college. Maybe they're social work students who are needing to do a practicum or internship. So you're looking for students who are in their last year of the social work program who need to do an internship. Those are just two examples of many. Or it could just be that you're looking for people who have a high school diploma, who have a love for working with young people, and have some experience in working with young people in some setting. It doesn't have to be some high level characteristic. And then the second piece is the site. So you'll want to list as much information you can about the places where members will be serving. These could be external to your organizations, like they're being placed at external organizations that are not a part of your organization, but you're going to be entering into partnerships with those external organizations where members are going to be placed. Or if they're internal to your organization, details about where within your organization they're going to be. And it's asked that you provide as much information as you can about it, like the context in which the intervention is being delivered, the setting or community condition, and that could be, just thinking about Anne with the schools, it could be the following 5 elementary schools that are tier 1 schools with high rates of poverty in rural communities in Virginia. It doesn't have to be that specific, but I mean, it should be as specific as you can. So I'm gonna stop first and see if you have any questions before we go into the sample. Okay, let's make sure
When
there's
you-
none in the, oh,
Quick question, when you talk
Yeah.
about the sites, do we,
Mhm.
I mean, I've glanced at it, but there's not a whole lot of extra documents we have to provide in that, like, we wouldn't need to have the MOUs with the sites that say that they've agreed to receive the additional support.
No, not at the,
Okay.
no. I mean, your commission might at some point in time want you to show your site agreements. They might review it because site agreements are important if you're having members placed at external. But at this point, you're just giving the basic information about the places you believe AmeriCorps members are serving. And you're not necessarily like locked into that. Like it may be after you make the application that you all decide that one of the sites is no longer going to be it, but you got a new one. And so once you finalize your application, those details will be asked in terms of the final site list. Good question. But getting that partnership agreement done sooner than later is also really important. And your sites is why we asked one of the questions we told you to think about is, who do I need to engage in conversation with sooner than later? Because there's a level of commitment that those sites are going to have to agree to. There may be a financial commitment because you need them to invest some money to make the budget work, or it could be just they need to understand that they're going to be required to supervise the members, provide certain onboarding and training to the members, report data. Like there's certain things that they may have to agree upon. So they need, the sooner they can know that, the better. All right, let me escape out of this. And I'm going to pull up the sample logic model. Again, this is going to be something we'll share with you afterwards. But I think visually, it's just nice to see some examples of how it can be laid out. So I did an example of a communities and schools program, since that's one of the folks that are represented here with Anne. And so you'll see the problem column starts with kind of an introduction. COVID was especially hard for elementary at-risk students in South Central Texas who lost some foundational school skills due to the lack of educational opportunities and absences. Gave some research about the loss of learning during COVID, especially around particular demographics. And then also additionally, students report an increased use of substances and alcohol, and report having thought about community suicide. Giving some statistics about dropout, giving some statistics about economically disadvantaged students in each of the schools that we're talking about serving, and report card ratings. So giving some specific data about the places. Yeah, I'm not saying this is the most perfect logic model, but it's a good start. And then I think ideally I probably would have also added maybe that there's been some retention issues with staff at the schools, both counselors and teachers. I might add that before I send out a sample, and I might make a note here about additionally, there are retention issues among staff, particularly counselors and teachers. Because one of the things I'm talking about in this logic model is what we're trying to do with members to get them into the school system working in the future. So I'll add that detail before I send it to you. And then you'll see the inputs here. I have, just like I talked about before, I have 39 AmeriCorps members, 26 are half-time and 13 are minimum time. So I not only said the full number, but I talked about the breakdown of types. And then I gave the characteristics. Members are required to have completed their high school education or have an equivalent qualification while actively pursuing post-secondary education. And then I have hold strong expectations that these members have an open-minded approach, a deep understanding of the unique needs within the community, effective communication skills, a genuine passion for promoting youth mental health and literacy. So I'm not asking for a high-level degree, but I'm asking for certain characteristics that I hope they come to that will be important in the activities we're asking them to do. So they could be you want to think about the characteristics that you're looking for, and does it really match what you're asking for them to do? I also put that minimum time members will be college students in the area social work program using the service term as their internship requirement for graduation. And so I talked about where they're going to be placed. Some of them are going to be placed at elementary school campuses in certain districts, some of which will focus on literacy and academic supports, and some of which will focus on youth counseling and social emotional learning support. Probably should have spelled that out first because I hadn't used it yet. You don't want to assume that the people that review the application know all of our little acronyms, so always good to spell out. And then I put in the staff that would be supporting the program, both larger staff of the organization that might be just a support for, overarching things, and then the direct staff that will help manage it. And then some other inputs that I put in here are like member training certifications. One of the things that I want to do with this program is ensure that members are trained in youth mental health specialist certification, mental health first aid, and as appropriate, the teacher certification track program that we'd like to put some of them through a fast track program. Additional supports, I added a few things that like other trainings that I wanted to provide members throughout the year beyond those certifications. And then just continued learning opportunities. So again, these are all things you're going to put into the program to make it successful. So hopefully you can start to see that there's examples of things that are supporting both the direct impact we're hoping the members have on the kids they're serving, and also the direct impact we want to have with the members themselves, those two legs of the AmeriCorps stool or the guiding principles. So then we go back to the activities. So in the activities column, I divide it up into my two buckets. So I have some members that are focusing on literacy supports and some members that are focusing on like youth mental health, social emotional learning. So I break it up into the literacy members and I put what they're going to be doing. I have a general introduction that they're going to be addressing student achievement gaps due to COVID and related learning loss. Probably change that. And then each member will serve a minimum of 12 students. So I talk about the caseload 2 times per week through academic support and or mentoring that last a minimum of 30 minutes per session. So here's where I started talking about the dosage pieces, the intensity of it, the frequency. And then I get more specific, like students will be pulled out to participate in one-on-one meetings or in small group facilitation. Academic support will focus on improving reading levels, and mentoring will focus on social emotional learning. And then the minimum time members, I break them out and talk about what they're going to be doing. They're going to be conducting one-on-one counseling session 1 time per week for 45 minutes for each student. Members are going to carry a caseload of 5 students. So there's again that specificity that I can provide. They'll carry out 2 group sessions per week on SEL topics for students identified as at risk by the school counselor. And then for all, I then have an all category because I maybe have buckets, but then I want all of them to work towards something that is similar across all my members. And I'm saying that on each of the campuses that they're going to be at, I want the members to organize one school-wide event that's focusing on social emotional skills per semester. I'm not saying yours has to look exactly like this, but this is just an example of how it could be organized. And then as you can see, I have this other leg of the stool still represented in the member experience. So I really want to highlight the unique things that I'm going to be doing to help the members themselves. And we're going to provide orientation and ongoing training to support the members in being strong literacy tutors and education advocates. We're going to deliver 2 certification trainings to all members and make available a fast track teacher certification process. Okay. And then your outputs and outcomes. So the performance measures that you are going to have to think about are, there's a document, it's the performance measure instructions that we'll talk about in December. And each of the performance measures that you have an opportunity to look at have a letter number combination. So for the education measures, they all have the letter ED and then some number after it. So you would put whatever measures you decide, you would put the letter number combination, and then you would include the performance measure language. So this one is ED1A. It's number of individuals served. It's just a generic number of individuals served, and you would put in the actual target. So my measure is ED1A, 312 individuals served. you're actually going to find for the most part that most of the output measures, with the exception of a few, are just individuals served, unless you're working with like houses or land or waterways or organizations. But for the most part, it's individuals served. Because some of you might find yourself in the healthy futures category, but you'll still see the same output language, individuals served. And then I list other outputs, some of which I know count. So I'm going to go ahead and put the numbers, but you don't have to. Like, you could either put 13 school-wide events focus on social emotional learning, or you could simply write the number of school-wide events focused on social emotional learning. So it could be just a generic statement, number of, or it could be an actual number. You have the option to do that. I said 50 families served at each of the campus-wide events and 50 volunteers recruited. There's probably a few other outputs I could put in there, but that's where I started. And then for the member experience here, you're going to see the generic language here. Number of members who successfully complete their year of service, number of members who earn their 2 youth mental health certifications, number of members who complete the teacher certification. These are just counts. They're not changes, they're just counts. And you could write them generically again, like number of, or you could actually put in a target number. And then here's the outcomes. So to start first with the performance measure, the performance measure for this program is focused on the academic piece, because a majority of members are on the academic side. So I chose ED5A, which is the letter number combination for this measure, and it's the number of students with improved academic performance. So I said 265 students of that 312 that we served are going to improve in their academic performance. And then the rest of my outcomes are just generic statements. I don't have to put a number to them, but I'm trying to paint a picture to the commission and the reviewers what change I'm hoping to see as a result of my activities. So it might be increased social emotional learning, improve coping skills, increase self-confidence, concept and confidence, increase interest in school, increase interest in reading, improved report cards. All of those are examples of knowledge, skills, attitudes, or opinions. For the member experience side, I'm weaving throughout member pieces too. You don't have to. You only do that if it's like real intentional. It's something really above and beyond. But it might be increased awareness of education and poverty challenges that exist in the community and served. Maybe the number of members who indicate they believe they have the power and influence to help address the education and literacy challenges we face. Okay, these are increase of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and opinions about the members. And then here's the midterm column. It's behaviors and action. So increase attendance. Students report they read with family members at least 3 times a week. Excuse me. Improvements in classroom behavior. Improvements in classroom participation. Increase in the number of students being promoted to the next grade level, and more. So like, these are examples of actions or behaviors as a result of improved knowledge, skills, attitudes, and opinions. And here's some examples of the member piece. Members develop an idea they could implement or share with others to address youth mental health or education issues. And members work in the youth mental health or education field or enter further schooling with one of these 2 focuses post AmeriCorps service, because their hope is that once they finish their term of service, they enter into the field or enter into further school in that field. So that's an action or behavior. And then your long-term outcomes are things that are longer changes in condition. You might not ever have the ability to see those outcomes or measure them, but you're painting the picture of what you hope to see happen as a result of all your hard work. So it could be that, the children are equipped with the social, emotional skills and academic skills they need beyond elementary school. They have decreased substance abuse and thoughts of suicide among students, a positive outlook for their future, increased promotion rate, graduation rate, and college acceptance rate. And then with your members, I might want my members to continue to work in these fields 3 years after their service term because of the retention rate. I might have cited in the problem column is staff are leaving within the first 3 years of their employment. And maybe members say their experiences increase their involvement in community and or civic life. So I'm going to stop and see if y'all have any questions. Okay. So again, we'll be sharing this with you so you can have it as an example to work through what your own logic model would look like. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And we're just going to wrap up with a few things. Oops. Okay. So a few final wrap-ups, some of which we talked about last week, but I want to mention them again. I introduced this in the beginning, but your grant application, particularly your logic model, determines what's allowable. If you don't put it in your logic model and it's not reasonable based upon what's in your logic model, then essentially those activities are not allowable. So you couldn't, get awarded for the grant. And then once you're in operation, decide one day, I'm going to move these 5 members and have them do this. And it's totally outside of the realm of what's reasonable based upon your grant application. That's considered not allowable. So it's important that your logic model is that most important document that determines what's allowable. And so are the other grant elements, but I think the logic model in particular. And then we always, and we're going to say this every time, start with documents in Word or Excel. So like your budget, you'll finalize it in Excel, and then you'll copy and paste it into eGrants. With the logic model document, you'll use a Word document, work on it there until it's final, or a Google Doc. And then once it's final, you'll copy and paste into eGrants. You should never directly do your drafts in eGrants. Never. And it's good to have it as a final record for you so that you have that for your next application or for people that may follow you if you're no longer there. Once you do that, you're going to want to enter into eGrants at least a minimum of 1 week prior to the due date. The earlier, the better. One, because you need to test your page count. Just because it looks like it's in 8 pages in Word doesn't mean it's going to be 8 pages in eGrants. And there are also character count limits in each of the columns. So you just want to make sure you test. And then also, just in case anything happens with eGrants, you have glitches, you still have some time to work it through. And just remember that they're evaluating the quality of your applications based on the criteria provided in the notice of funding opportunity and the review sheets. So everything we just talked about now are the things that they're going to be looking for in your logic model documents specifically as they read that in conjunction with the narrative. And then you all have many resources available to you. So just like we talked about last week, Serve Virginia website, even though the current NOFO isn't out yet, the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the grant application that will be due next year, you can see past resources on their website. And then you all also have access to the On3Learn courses, one of which is the logic model. So we have a catalog for applicant courses, people who are making an application to AmeriCorps, and there are 5 courses in that is our organization of fit, understanding the application narrative, logic model, performance measures, and budget. You also have access to On3Learn staff courses. So there's a 2-part budget series if that's something you want to do a deep dive in sooner than later. And there's also a staff course on allowable, unallowable, and prohibited activities, which you could take too, just to learn what that is, because those 3 terms are super important in the AmeriCorps world. So you all have access to that with the code that Serve Virginia has provided you. And as we have just a couple more minutes, are there any final questions that you all have?